At the birth of America, politics wasn't polite. It was personal, raw, emotional, and sometimes downright cruel. Long before cable news and Twitter wars, the Founding Fathers were already tearing each other apart behind closed doors. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson weren't just colleagues, they were intellectual soulmates. Together they debated liberty over wine, shaped the Declaration of Independence, and imagined a nation built on reason and freedom. For years they stood shoulder to shoulder, believing they were fighting the same battle. But ambition has a way of poisoning even the strongest friendships. In 1796, everything changed. Adams and Jefferson faced off for the presidency. Adams won, barely. And under the rules of the time, that meant Jefferson didn't disappear. He became vice president. Imagine waking up every day knowing your political rival sat one heartbeat away from power. The tension was suffocating. Smiles were forced. Trust evaporated. By 1800, the gloves were off. The election became vicious, filled with insults so brutal they still shock historians. Jefferson's allies portrayed Adams as unstable and tyrannical. Adams' supporters painted Jefferson as immoral and dangerous. These weren't policy debates. They were character assassinations. When Jefferson finally won, Adams was crushed. He didn't stay for the celebration. Instead, before dawn on Inauguration Day, he quietly fled Washington, becoming the first president to skip the peaceful transfer of power. A silent act of heartbreak and humiliation. Why did it hurt so much? Because this wasn't just a political loss. Adams felt betrayed. Jefferson believed Adams had betrayed American ideals. Their friendship didn't just fracture, it shattered. And yet, time did something remarkable. Years later, the two men found their way back to each other through letters. Pages filled with regret, wisdom, and shared memories of a revolution they once fought together. In a poetic twist of fate, they died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. Enemies in politics, brothers in legacy. But if you think that feud was ugly, wait until you meet the rivalry that didn't just destroy reputations, it destroyed lives. Because the next feud turned grief into vengeance and changed American politics forever. If John Adams taught America how bitter politics could be, his son proved it could get far worse. In 1824, Andrew Jackson was a national hero, a war legend with massive public support. He won more votes than anyone else. He won more electoral votes than anyone else. And yet, he lost the presidency. Why? Because he didn't reach the required majority. The decision was thrown to the House of Representatives, where backroom deals replaced ballots. Henry Clay, the Speaker of the House, threw his support behind John Quincy Adams. Soon after Adams won, Clay was rewarded with the most powerful cabinet position in the country. To Jackson and his supporters, it felt like theft. They called it a corrupt bargain, and Jackson never forgot it. For 4 long years, he waited, stewing, planning, preparing revenge. When the 1828 rematch arrived, politics turned savage. Adams' allies attacked Jackson as violent and uneducated. Jackson's wife, Rachel, was publicly humiliated with accusations meant to destroy her reputation. Jackson's camp fired back, accusing Adams of moral corruption so outrageous it bordered on scandal fiction. This wasn't democracy anymore, it was war. Jackson won in a landslide. Adams, humiliated like his father before him, refused to attend the inauguration. History repeated itself, bitterness replacing dignity. But the real tragedy came weeks earlier. Rachel Jackson died suddenly before Andrew Jackson took office. He was shattered. At her funeral, Jackson blamed the campaign attacks for breaking her spirit. He never forgave those he believed responsible. This feud wasn't just political. It was grief turned into rage. And its impact was enormous. The fallout shattered the existing political order and helped give birth to the modern two-party system. America's politics would never be the same again. But even this blood-soaked rivalry pales compared to what happened next. A feud fought not with insults, but with power, betrayal, and the future of a broken nation hanging in the balance. Because after the Civil War, one rivalry would decide whether America truly healed or stayed broken. The Civil War ended, but America was still bleeding. Millions were freed from slavery. Cities lay in ruins. The nation desperately needed unity and leadership. Instead, it got a Cold War inside the White House. Andrew Johnson, elevated to president after Lincoln's assassination, believed the South should be forgiven quickly. Former Confederates were pardoned. Old power structures crept back into place. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's greatest general, saw this as betrayal. To him, Reconstruction wasn't about mercy, it was about justice, protecting freed Black Americans, preventing the very forces that caused the war from reclaiming control. At first, they tried to work together. It didn't last. The breaking point came when Johnson attempted to remove his own Secretary of War, a move Congress had made illegal. Johnson expected Grant to back him. Instead, Grant chose the law. Johnson exploded. He publicly accused Grant of disloyalty, insubordination, and dishonor. In a nation that adored Grant, the attack backfired spectacularly. Grant calmly responded, dismantling Johnson's claims with facts and restraint. The public chose sides, and Johnson lost. When Grant was elected president, the feud was beyond repair. On Inauguration Day, Grant refused to ride with Johnson. Johnson, furious and humiliated, refused to attend the ceremony at all. This wasn't petty drama. It shaped Reconstruction itself. Grant went on to use federal power aggressively, fighting the Ku Klux Klan and enforcing civil rights in the South. One feud, two visions of America's future. Only one would win. But the most heartbreaking rivalry wasn't built on ideology. It was built on friendship and betrayal. Because the next feud began with trust and ended by tearing a political party in half. Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft were inseparable. Roosevelt trusted Taft completely, so much so that he personally handed him the presidency in 1908, believing his friend would protect the progressive movement they built together. But once in office, Taft changed, slowly at first, then unmistakably. He sided with conservatives, undid reforms, fired Roosevelt loyalists. Roosevelt felt stabbed in the back, not politically, personally. By 1912, the friendship was ashes. Roosevelt came out of retirement to challenge Taft for the Republican nomination. The insults were brutal. Roosevelt mocked Taft's intelligence. Taft accused Roosevelt of deception. When Roosevelt lost the nomination, he did something unprecedented. He walked away and formed his own party. Not to win, but to destroy Taft. It worked. The Republican vote split. A Democrat won the presidency. Roosevelt outperformed the sitting president. Taft carried only 2 states. The humiliation broke him. Friends later recalled Taft in tears, not because he lost power, but because he lost someone he once loved like a brother. Politics had claimed another friendship. But if betrayal hurts, imagine a rivalry so cold it may have worsened the Great Depression itself. Because the next feud didn't just freeze hearts, it froze the economy. By 1932, America was collapsing. Banks failed daily. Families starved. The Great Depression crushed hope itself. Herbert Hoover believed history would vindicate him. Franklin D. Roosevelt promised bold change. They despised each other. After FDR's landslide victory, Hoover begged him to support emergency measures to calm the markets during the transition. Roosevelt refused. He didn't want to inherit Hoover's failures, even temporarily. The result? Chaos. Banks panicked. Confidence collapsed further. Historians now believe this silent standoff worsened the crisis. On Inauguration Day, they rode together, stiff, silent, resentful. A single photo captured the moment. 2 men, 1 car, 0 trust. This wasn't loud hatred. It was cold indifference, and America paid the price. But cold rivalries can still burn deep, especially when pride and principle collide, because the next feud turned war heroes into sworn enemies. Harry Truman admired Dwight Eisenhower. He even offered to help launch Ike's political career. But admiration shattered when Eisenhower stayed silent during attacks on General George Marshall, Truman's most trusted advisor. To Truman, silence wasn't strategy, it was betrayal. Their relationship collapsed. During the transition, cooperation suffered. Even as the Korean War raged on, Truman extended peace offerings. Eisenhower declined. The bitterness lingered for years. And Truman's anger didn't stop there. His hatred for Richard Nixon burned hotter than ever, a man he saw as the embodiment of political dishonesty. Even decades later, Truman never softened. But the darkest betrayal was yet to come, one involving secret sabotage during wartime. Because the next feud wasn't just immoral, it may have cost lives. Lyndon B. Johnson believed Richard Nixon committed treason. In 1968, as Johnson tried to negotiate peace in Vietnam, Nixon's campaign secretly urged South Vietnam to stall talks, promising a better deal later. Johnson knew. Intelligence confirmed it, but he stayed silent. Exposing Nixon meant exposing illegal surveillance. So Johnson swallowed the truth. Furious, powerless. The war dragged on. Thousands died. When Nixon took office, the transition was icy. No warmth, no forgiveness. Politics had crossed a line. And yet nothing would fracture America like the rivalry that came next. One fueled by identity, legitimacy, and rage. Because the final feud didn't just divide leaders, it divided the nation. Barack Obama and Donald Trump's feud began long before Trump ran for office. It started with conspiracy theories questioning Obama's legitimacy. Obama struck back publicly once, humiliating Trump on the national stage. Trump never forgot it. When Trump became president, dismantling Obama's legacy became personal. Insults escalated, norms collapsed, and when Trump lost in 2020, the feud reached its breaking point. Refusal to concede. January 6th. A transfer of power broken for the first time in generations. This wasn't just rivalry, it was rupture. And America is still feeling the shockwaves.